The next modifier that we're going to learn is the retaining wall site modifier. And this modifier is different than the other ones that we've learned in that you can't draw it by using the site modifier tool, and you can't create one by using the create objects from other shape command. This one you need to draw your walls in first, and then your retaining wall site modifier will be based on those walls. Now the two will still be separate objects, but there's just that requirement that you have that wall. So let's go ahead and add that to our drawing. The other thing that I want to note is that in the order of operations, remember we said that you begin by drawing site modifiers for known elevations. Well, this retaining wall site modifier, it's actually the last type of modifier that you want to add to your site. So to get started, I'm going to come over here, make sure that I'm on the fences and wall design layer. Then I'm going to come grab my wall tool. We're going to continue to use that same method that we used when we drew our house walls, which was we want to be in the left control line mode and we want to draw in a clockwise direction. So with these retaining walls, when you're creating this modifier, it's important that you know which side of that wall is upslope and which side is downslope. And so they relate that with what's the right side of the wall and what's the left side of the wall. So if you always draw clockwise, then you will know which side is upslope and which side is downslope. And then I want to come over here to the tool preferences. And here under insertion options, that's where I can go ahead and set where the bottom offset of that wall is as well as the height. And so in this instance, the bottom offset is going to be 0. And the height that I want, because if you'll remember, the highest elevation that I have in the front yard is 3 feet. So it's going to be 3 feet. And that if I enter in 3 feet up here for the height of the wall, that's automatically going to update this top offset right there. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and I'm ready to start drawing. Now I am going to need a return over here because of the driveway. So I'm going to start up here at the face of the house and just draw my wall. And then you're going to notice the return near the stairs, it's actually going to be under the stairs, and that's because it's easier just to end the wall like that, and then come and select that wall, use the Move by Points tool, and then reposition that wall, just because I'm in that left-hand control mode, and it would not be easy to figure out the alignment for that part. So that's an easier way to go about that. Let's go ahead and add the other side of the stairs now. And I'm just going to handle this the exact same way that I handled the first one, where I come and I select that wall that's by the stairs. There we go. Then grab my Move by Points tool. Then I will just reposition that wall. And so now my alignment looks good. And in fact, I think I want to make a few more changes. So I'm going to take this wall. I'm going to reposition it so that the right side of the wall aligns with the riser right here, and then I'll come over here to the other side and change that alignment as well. There we go. So now I have my walls all set up. Let's kind of look at what those look like in the space. Okay, and so I'm going to recommend that we handle these two sections separately. So I'm going to come over here. I already have one retaining wall that's been selected, and this is a good point to sort of keep my design layers nice and organized. So I'm going to come over here and change the active design layer from the fences and walls. I'm going to change that so that it's site modifiers, and that way this new retaining wall site modifier that I'm about to add, it'll just be on the correct design layer. So we have another command here. In order to select these other walls, I can just come over here to the edit menu and then go select connected objects, and notice that that automatically selects the two other walls that are on the other side right there. So the next step is to come up here to the landmark menu and then go down here to create retaining wall site modifier. This is going to open up a new dialog box, and notice that you have 3 tabs here across the top. So for this first tab, that is for the pad, and you'll notice that pad modifier is right here at number 1 and number 1 here as well. And think about this in terms of construction. If you were a contractor adding these retaining walls to the landscape, your pad would be at the very bottom of the retaining wall, meaning that you're going to go ahead and have to excavate all of that material to make that flat in order to add the material for your wall. And so we're going to copy that same idea or concept here, and we're going to have our pad at the bottom of the wall. Next up, we're going to move on to the side edges. And remember, this is where it was important to pay attention to the direction in which you were drawing the wall. For this wall, we drew in a clockwise direction, and so for the right-hand side, which is this bottom section right here for number 3, the right-hand side of the wall is at the top of the wall, and so we're going to select this offset below top of wall. Now, if we want, we can set a number right here. I think just to keep things simple for now, I'm going to go ahead and set that to 0. And then for the left-hand side of the wall, which is the downslope side of the wall, I'm going to come back up here to the left side, number 2, and I want that offset to be at the bottom of the wall, and I want that to be at 0. This last tab is for the start/end edges right here, so you can see number 4 and number 5. I recommend just go ahead and leave those edges on. This is something that you can toggle on and off in the Object Info palette after you've created this. So go ahead and click OK, and then I'm going to change my layer option to active only so that we can take a look at what this site modifier looks like, because there are a lot of different components here. So if I come over here and I grab the reshape tool and I can see where all of these vertices are, it's important to be able to break this apart. And so remember that the right-hand side of the wall, that was our upslope side. And so these 4 vertices right there represent the right side. For the left-hand side, there's actually a couple different vertices down here, so it's a little bit more difficult to read. But if you zoom in, you can see it. And so for the left-hand side, this outer edge of the wall, and I'm hovering over that vertex right now, that represents the right-hand side of the wall. This one that's over to the left just a little bit, that's the pad. So remember from that first tab that we looked at, that's where the pad is. And so we can actually control specific points all along this retaining wall site modifier. But let's go ahead. I just want to update the site model and see what changes happen. Okay, and so I've got some goofy looking stuff. This doesn't look too bad actually, but there are some changes that I would like to make with that modifier. For instance, it makes sense that the slope up here needs to match the driveway, but I wouldn't necessarily want the slope to continue down where this returns for the stairs. And so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change my layer options to show snap others, just so that it's easy for me to click and grab onto that modifier. And so if you'll remember, that's why we put the site modifiers on their own design layers, so that we have an easy way to go ahead and click on those. So come over here, and then I'm going to grab my reshape tool. And then for both the pad and the left-hand side of this modifier, I just want to click and drag those so that they go up and match that point. And the pad needs to follow too. So I'll drag that up. And then what I want is I want the slope to match across this wall and then kind of grade down to the front of these stairs. So I'm going to do the same thing and grab on those 2 vertices. And the nice thing is that, like, as you're clicking and dragging these different vertexes, it'll snap. If you're using your snapping palette, it'll snap, and that way you'll know that you're at the exact same elevation as the other vertices in the file. Now there is one more thing that I need to do over here, and that is that this vertex that's for the right hand side up here by the stairs, I actually need to lower that so that it's in line with the rest of the vertices at the base of the steps right there. So I'm going to come back over here and make the site model my active design layer. Then I'm going to select that site model and update it. And so now I've got this nice flat terrain over here as a planting bed between the stairs and the driveway. There's one other thing that I'd like to do before we move on to the other side of the yard, and that is I can actually reshape my walls. So if I come over here to the Fences and Walls design layer, and I click on that wall, come back to the Reshape tool, there it is. So I can go ahead and in this first mode, Reshape 3D Walls mode, I I can go ahead and click and drag this vertex that's here at the top and then have it align with that the tread of the first stair there. And then I can come over here and using the second mode, the Add 3D Wall Peak mode, I can go ahead and click this vertex and then click again and just kind of create it's going to be like a flat area up here, and then this wall is going to slope starting from the riser at the top and going down to the riser at the bottom. And so that's sort of a more natural way to draw a wall by those stairs. We're going to do exactly the same thing to the other side, but there's a couple things that I want to take a look at before we do that. And the first is, remember in a previous video, we went ahead and we added this grade limit over here. And so if we create a retaining wall site modifier using this wall, we have a grade limit going right through the middle of it. And a grade limit and a site modifier cannot overlap. So let's go ahead and take care of that first. I'm going to come over here and change the active design layer to site modifiers, select that grade limit, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and remove a few points here. So I'm going to grab the reshape tool, and then I'm going to use the delete vertex. I'm going to delete that vertex as well as that vertex, and then I'm going to move this corner point away from that retaining wall. So this isn't going to look perfect over here because we don't really have a solution for the neighbor's yard for where they've got natural slope. If you forget which direction your walls have been drawn, you can simply come over here and grab the selection tool and then click on one of those walls. And I need to either change my layer options to show snap, modify others, or just change the active design layer. So I'll go ahead and change it to the fence and walls so that I can click on this wall. And then remember, when we select that wall, we can see which direction this was drawn. And so in this case, this is the beginning of the wall. So the right-hand side of the wall is upslope and the left-hand side of the wall is downslope. And then we want to make sure that all the walls that are connected to each other are drawn in the same direction. And so that is the case here as well. There is an option up here in the Object Info palette where you can reverse the sides. So just click on this Reverse Sides button and notice that the beginning of the wall changes. But ours was correct the first time, so we'll go ahead and reverse that back. All right, so now I'm ready to come in here and add that retaining wall site modifier. So I've selected both of my walls, and then I'm going to come over to the landmark menu and go down here to create retaining wall site modifier. All of the settings are going to be exactly the same because the direction that I drew that wall is the same as the other set of walls, but let's just walk through them one more time. So this first tab is for pad, and we know that we want the pad to be at the bottom of the wall because that's how it would be built by a contractor in the landscape. And so we're going to select offset above wall bottom, but we're going to go ahead and leave the offset at 0. Next up, we have our edges. And so we know that the right hand, which is the upslope part of the wall and corresponds down here with number 3, we know that that offset is going to be at the top of the wall. Once again, we're going to leave that at 0. And then for the left-hand side, which is going to be the downslope side of this wall, so we want to select offset at wall bottom, and we're going to leave that as 0. And then over here for start and end edges, we're going to go ahead and just leave those on. So click OK. And then I'm going to go ahead, I didn't set my active design layer up the way that I did the first time, but that's okay. I can come over here in the Object Info palette for the retaining wall site modifier and just change that layer from fences and walls to site modifiers. So now I'm going to make site modifiers my active design layer. I'm going to come over here and grab my reshape tool, and then I just want to kind of mirror the points so that they match the elevation that I set over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag all of these vertices. And remember that the one on the stair return, this one that's at the top, needs to come down to the bottom. Great. So I'm going to change my active design layer to site model so I can select my site model and update. And there we go. So we've added a retaining wall to the front of this property. Now it does look a little funky over here. And as I mentioned before, that's because we haven't really resolved how we'll treat the property over on the neighbor's side where they don't have a retaining wall. So that's fine in this instance. If you want to clean it up a little bit, you can come back over here to the site modifier design layer. And then we already have that retaining wall site modifier selected. So I'm going to come back and grab the reshape tool. And I can go ahead and just move those points up to the top. And in fact, I think I'm going to leave the pad down there at the bottom. Just by moving the left-hand modifier, I think it'll smooth it out a little bit. So I'm going to come back over here to the site model design layer, grab my selection tool, and update that site model one more time. And you can see it kind of smooths it out a little bit. So this is a really basic example of how the retaining wall site modifier works. And I just want to recap some of the basics that we've covered already. And that is that this specific modifier is created by drawing the walls in the file first and then selecting them to create the retaining wall site modifier. Also, in terms of the order in which modifiers get added to the file, this is going to be the very last modifier type that you want to add. And also, it's important that you know the direction that you drew the wall because the settings in the dialog box are based on either the left or the right hand side of the wall.